Jonah Calder had lived on the edge of Red Hollow for nearly 20 years, and the town believed they understood him, though most never tried to ask. He was known as stubborn, quiet, and fair, a rancher who paid his debts on time and kept his fences strong when the woman arrived. One late afternoon, riding a borrowed horse and wrapped in a faded shawl, every eye noticed Jonah first. He dismounted slowly, helped her down, and led her toward his wagon without a word. The woman whispered, "Please do not do this," and her voice trembled like wind through dry grass. Jonah did not answer, and that silence spread faster than any shout. By nightfall, rumors ran wild. People said he had bought her. People said she was trouble. People said Jonah Calder had crossed a line. The truth was quieter and heavier than gossip. The woman named Eliza had come to Jonah because the town had already decided her fate. She had been accused without proof, judged without mercy, and driven from the boarding house where she worked. When Jonah took her to his ranch, it was not possession but protection, yet no one cared to hear that. The next morning, Red Hollow woke angry. Men gathered near the saloon, women whispered from porches, and the sheriff was sent riding fast toward Jonah land. Outrage burned, not because of what Jonah had done, but because he refused to follow the cruel rules everyone else obeyed. That anger would shape everything that followed, pushing Eliza and Jonah into a storm neither had sought, yet both would be forced to face together before the town could learn the cost of its judgment. The day ended with silence hanging heavier than dust over Red Hollow as evening shadows swallowed every doubt. Eliza slept little that night on the narrow bed Jonah had prepared in the small back room. She expected anger, fists, or chains because that was what the world had taught her. Instead, she heard Jonah moving quietly outside, fixing a latch and setting water near the door. At dawn, he knocked once and waited. He said, "The sheriff is coming, and the town is restless. I will speak first. You owe no one anything." Eliza followed him onto the porch and felt eyes even before riders appeared. The sheriff arrived with 3 men, none of them cruel, but all uncertain. They demanded answers, and Jonah gave them calmly. He said Eliza was under his protection until facts were known, and that no harm would come to her while she stayed. The men argued about law and order and what decent people expected. Jonah listened, then said, "Decency begins with mercy." That answer traveled faster than bullets. By midday, townsfolk gathered near the ranch gate. Some shouted, others prayed, a few simply watched. Eliza stood beside Jonah, shaking but unhidden. When someone yelled that she should be sent away, Jonah stepped forward and said no. The outrage exploded. People accused him of buying her, of forcing her, of shaming the town. Eliza finally spoke and told them she had asked for help and received it. Nothing more. Her words did little to cool the crowd. Yet something changed. A woman in the back lowered her eyes. A man stepped away in doubt. The sheriff warned Jonah trouble would follow. Jonah replied, "Then let it come." The crowd dispersed, uneasy, angry, and uncertain. Eliza realized the rancher had chosen conflict to give her time and safety, and that choice tied their fates together in ways neither understood yet, but accepted silently. Days passed under tension like stretched wire. Jonah continued his work, feeding cattle, repairing fences, and riding the range, while Eliza learned the rhythms of the ranch. She cooked, cleaned, and helped where she could. But Jonah never ordered her. He asked and waited, and that waiting healed something deep. Inside the town, anger cooled into argument. Some believed Jonah right, others feared change. The sheriff returned alone one evening carrying papers. He admitted the accusations against Eliza were false and built on envy and rumor. The law cleared her name, but pride did not clear the town. Jonah told the sheriff Eliza would decide her future. The next day, Eliza rode into Red Hollow by choice. Gasps followed her as she dismounted. She spoke plainly, saying she was not owned, not forced, and not ashamed. She said Jonah had shown her kindness when cruelty was easier. Silence answered her. Then a shopkeeper nodded, another offered water. A child smiled. The outrage did not vanish, but it weakened. Jonah watched from a distance, letting Eliza stand alone and strong. That night she thanked him, and he said she owed him nothing. Eliza realized then that staying was no longer refuge, but desire, and that frightened her more than any accusation ever had. She walked back to the ranch beneath stars, feeling the weight of freedom settle on her shoulders. For the first time, she chose uncertainty over fear and partnership over escape. Jonah waited by the fire, not asking questions, simply sharing the quiet. Together, they faced a future no longer ruled by the town that had once tried to define them and failed to break what respect had already begun to build between two stubborn hearts in the open land where choice finally mattered more than fear for both. By the end of the week, Red Hollow was quieter, not kinder, but thoughtful. Jonah did not seek forgiveness, nor did Eliza demand it. Life on the ranch continued, shaped by work, sunrise meals, and long evenings of talk. They spoke of the past carefully, and of the future honestly. Love, if it came, would come slowly, earned, not claimed. The town outrage faded into memory, replaced by a lesson few would admit aloud. Sometimes doing what is right looks wrong to those afraid of change. Jonah and Eliza understood that truth. Now their story did not end in applause, but in peace chosen daily under the wide sky. They remained because leaving would mean surrendering the hard-won ground they had claimed together. Trust grew through shared chores, quiet laughter, and moments of fear faced side by side. Eliza learned she could rest without guarding every breath. Jonah learned strength included listening. Seasons would turn and challenges would return, but the foundation held. What began with outrage became an example whispered to children and remembered by those who watched courage stand firm. Without shouting, without chains, without shame. It was a quiet victory, the kind that does not fill newspapers, but changes lives. One choice led to another until dignity replaced cruelty and patience defeated rumor. Under that sky, Jonah and Eliza kept choosing respect, and in doing so, found a love that needed no defense, a love built slowly through courage and mercy that endured beyond anger and judgment, and remained steady when easier paths tempted them away from what they knew was right for the rest of their days on that land. They defended together, without apology or regret, proving sometimes one brave act can outlast a whole town anger and change history in small, quiet ways. The morning after the town dispersed, Jonah Calder woke before dawn, as he always did. The sky was pale and wide, holding that quiet promise only the frontier seemed to offer. He stepped outside with a cup of coffee and listened to the cattle stir. Behind him, inside the house, Eliza remained asleep. For the first time since she arrived, she had slept through the night without waking in fear. That knowledge settled on Jonah like a responsibility he did not take lightly. Red Hollow did not forget quickly. By mid-morning, riders appeared along the distant road, not hostile but watchful. Jonah continued his work as usual, repairing a broken fence and hauling water from the well. He refused to act as if the town's judgment controlled his land. When Eliza came out, wrapped in a simple dress he had bought in town weeks earlier, and never expected to give away, she hesitated on the porch. Jonah looked up and nodded, offering reassurance without words. Eliza joined him near the corral, helping guide a restless horse. Her movements were careful but confident. She spoke little, but when she did, Jonah listened fully. She told him about her life before Red Hollow, about working from town to town, trusting the wrong people, and learning how fast kindness could turn into blame. Jonah did not interrupt. He only said that the past did not define her unless she allowed it to. Those words stayed with her long after the sun climbed higher. In town, the mood shifted from outrage to uncertainty. The sheriff faced questions he could not easily answer. Some people felt embarrassed by how quickly they had condemned Eliza. Others felt angry that Jonah had challenged their authority without raising a fist. Pride and fear mixed into a dangerous silence. The saloon buzzed with arguments, while the church preached patience. Red Hollow stood at a crossroads, though few recognized it as such. Late that afternoon, Jonah rode into town alone. Eliza watched from the porch, her heart tight with worry. He had told her he needed supplies, but both knew his presence would stir emotions again. Jonah walked into the general store calmly, greeting those who met his eyes. Some nodded back, others turned away. When a man accused him of bringing shame to Red Hollow, Jonah answered simply that shame came from injustice, not mercy. The room fell quiet. Outside, the sheriff approached Jonah and admitted that the evidence against Eliza had collapsed. False statements had been exposed, and the truth was finally rising. Still, The sheriff warned him that forgiveness would come slowly. Jonah accepted that. He said change always did. When he returned to the ranch, Eliza ran to meet him. He told her the law no longer stood against her, but the town still needed time. She smiled softly, relief and sadness crossing her face together. That night, they shared dinner by lantern light. Eliza thanked Jonah again, but he stopped her gently. He told her she had stood her ground with courage, and that mattered more than anything he had done. Silence followed, comfortable and warm. Outside, coyotes called to one another, and the stars stretched endlessly overhead. Eliza realized she was no longer waiting to escape. She was deciding whether to stay. Over the next days, Eliza became part of the ranch's rhythm. She learned to ride confidently, to read the weather, and to anticipate Jonah's quiet habits. Jonah, in turn, learned to speak more, to share stories of his past, of wars survived and losses endured. Trust formed slowly, like water carving stone. There were no promises, only consistency. Red Hollow began to soften. A woman arrived one afternoon with fresh bread, offering it without apology. A ranch hand tipped his hat when passing Eliza on the road. These small gestures mattered. They did not erase the past, but they suggested a future less cruel. Jonah never celebrated the shift. He understood how fragile it was. One evening, Eliza asked Jonah why he had taken the risk. He thought for a long moment before answering. He said he had seen too many people punished for being vulnerable and too many others rewarded for staying silent. He said he was tired of watching fear pretend to be law. Eliza nodded, understanding more than words could explain. As summer deepened, Red Hollow adjusted. The scandal faded into memory, replaced by new concerns and daily labor. Yet something fundamental had changed. Jonah and Eliza had forced the town to look at itself, even if only briefly. That look had left a mark. Standing together at sunset, watching the land glow gold, Eliza felt something steady grow in her chest. It was not gratitude alone, nor was it fear. It was choice. Jonah felt it too, though he did not name it. They did not know what the future would bring, but they knew it would be faced honestly. The outrage that once threatened them now seemed distant, like a storm that had passed without breaking the ground beneath it. What remained was quiet strength, earned and protected. Red Hollow would remember their story differently over time. Some would call it defiance, others would call it love. Jonah and Eliza called it doing what was right, even when it was hardest, and allowing that choice to guide them forward together. Autumn arrived quietly at Jonah Calder's ranch, painting the hills with muted gold and cooling the air at dawn. Eliza noticed the change first, how the mornings felt gentler and the nights invited closer firelight. She had been on the ranch for months now, long enough for routines to feel natural and for fear to loosen its grip. Still, she knew this chapter of her life was fragile, shaped by choices that could not be undone, but could be honored. Jonah sensed it too, though he rarely spoke of endings or beginnings. The town of Red Hollow had changed in subtle ways. People greeted Jonah with less suspicion and Eliza with cautious respect. No one apologized outright, yet gestures replaced words. Supplies arrived on time. The sheriff tipped his hat when passing the ranch road. Children waved instead of staring. It was not forgiveness, but it was progress, and Jonah understood progress often arrived disguised as silence. Eliza spent her days helping where she could, learning more about ranch work and less about running from judgment. She found strength in simple tasks, in feeding horses and mending clothes, in choosing to stay present. Jonah watched her confidence grow, admiring her resilience without turning it into praise. He believed people deserved dignity without performance. That belief had guided him through war and loss, and now it guided him here. One evening, a rider appeared unexpectedly, carrying news from the neighboring valley. A land dispute had flared, and tempers were rising. Jonah listened carefully, knowing conflict had a way of spreading like wildfire. He declined involvement, but warned the rider that violence would only deepen old wounds. Eliza listened from the doorway, understanding that Jonah's strength came not from force, but from restraint. That lesson stayed with her. As weeks passed, Jonah and Eliza spoke more openly about the future. Not plans, but possibilities. Eliza admitted she had never imagined stability lasting this long. Jonah confessed he had not imagined sharing his life again. These confessions were quiet, offered without expectation. Trust had grown between them, not dramatic but steady, built on shared mornings and honest nights. Red Hollow eventually held a gathering to mark the harvest. Jonah hesitated before attending, but Eliza encouraged him. She said hiding would give the past too much power. Together, they rode into town, aware of every glance. The gathering was modest, filled with music and food, and for the first time, Eliza felt part of something rather than displayed within it. A woman invited her to dance. A man thanked Jonah for standing firm months earlier. The air felt lighter. Later that night, Jonah and Eliza stood beneath lantern light, watching the town move around them. Eliza realized she no longer felt like she was borrowing safety. She had helped build it. Jonah realized he was no longer guarding his solitude. He was sharing it. Neither spoke, but both understood the weight of that truth. When winter approached, Jonah repaired the house, adding insulation and fixing leaks. Eliza helped, laughing when mistakes were made and learning as she went. Their partnership was practical and emotional, blending survival with care. It was not the kind of love sung about in saloons, but it was real, shaped by respect and choice. One night, snow fell softly, blanketing the land. Jonah and Eliza sat by the fire, warmth close and silence comfortable. Eliza asked if Jonah regretted his decision, knowing it had cost him peace at times. Jonah answered honestly. He said peace that came from ignoring injustice was never real. Eliza smiled, feeling seen. By spring, Red Hollow had fully adjusted. The story of Outrage became a lesson told in quieter tones. Some said Jonah had been stubborn. Others said he had been brave. Eliza was no longer defined by rumor, but by presence. She had chosen her life deliberately, and the town slowly had followed her lead. Standing on the ridge overlooking the ranch, Jonah and Eliza watched the land renew itself. They did not speak of forever, but they did not avoid it either. They understood that love was not a promise against hardship, but a commitment to face it together. Their story did not end with applause or certainty. It ended with two people standing side by side, grounded, honest, and unafraid to continue. And so, in the quiet stretch of the Wild West, where judgment once ruled and fear spoke loudest, a different legacy took root. It was not born from conquest or pride, but from choosing compassion when it was least expected. Jonah and Eliza walked forward together, not because the world had changed overnight, but because they had, and that change was enough to shape everything that followed.